first order of business is please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And do a quick roll call of board members. Mr. Olson.
Here.
Mr. Redmond.
Here.
Mr. DeGrosse.
Here.
Mr. Kruschke's here. Mr. Koval.
Here.
We're missing Mr. Lixit at this time. Was the meeting properly notified?
Yes, it was. And as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded.
Okay. At this point, we will open it up for a community discussion regarding SEC reopening plan. Based on the survey that we did with the parents, we generated some frequently asked questions, and so our superintendent, Mr. Whitaker, will go over those at this time. And if you have questions, please enter them on the chat line, the Google Meets, and we can address those. So with that, we'll get
All right, welcome.
started.
Welcome everyone in attendance, in person and virtually through YouTube and Google Meet. Thank you for being a part of this meeting. So I just want to explain the practice and protocol for tonight's meeting, basically the format. Compiled a list of the frequently asked questions that we received from the parent survey, and I've grouped them into groups, and we'll discuss them. So we'll answer the questions and things in groups, and ask that folks in attendance please enter into the chat any of your questions for efficiency's sake. That way people aren't trying to talk over each other. It gets really cumbersome with the number of people digitally. We have a couple staff monitoring those chat, and we'll take breaks and ask those questions as they come in before moving on to the next category here. And then of course, we'd like to open it up to any questions that we did not cover throughout the evening and through the FAQ sheet to anyone to ask. And again, our admin team and board is here to answer your questions. And the purpose of this meeting is to provide information and clarity and answer questions regarding the plan that the administration recommended and the board approved. And it is not to debate, why certain decisions were made. Clarification, sure, but we're not here to debate whether it should be plan A, B, C, or debate other things within the plan. It's about us working together, moving forward.
And would you share your screen so that you can see the question better?
I can't. How's that? All right. So I'm sharing the FAQ document, and so that you can follow along and kind of see, again, there are about 3 pages with the questions and things. These are the categories from behaviors, busing, planning. Most of it is organization or daily operations. And then we're going to start out with close contact, quarantine protocol, and a lot of the health related topics. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Denver Garfield, our lead nurse.
Thanks, Tim. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
We get in the room.
Yep. Okay, perfect. All right, well, I'll go ahead and start with the close contact and quarantine protocol information. And Tim, I don't know if you're able to show the flow sheet, the close contact COVID-19 exclusion flow sheet.
Yep, got it up now. There you go. Should be on your screen.
Okay. Yep, perfect. So the information that we are using is all guidance that we are receiving from St. Croix County Public Health. We're working closely with them as well as Wisconsin Department of Instruction. And as you can see, the first flow sheet that's on here is the student-based COVID-19 exclusion criteria. And this is what it looks like from the health office standpoint, how we are being directed to manage students who present to us with symptoms, COVID-like symptoms. And I can tell you that this is definitely not going to be set in stone. This information more than likely will change as we get closer to the first day of school. But as of now, this is what we are following. So if students come to the office with any of those symptoms listed in that box, we will follow that flow sheet and treat them accordingly. The other thing we kind of are looking at is what is a close contact? What does quarantine mean? What does isolation mean? If we have, the school will be notified by public health if we do have a close contact in our district. Definition of a close contact, it means that you had direct contact with an infected individual, such as hugging, kissing, handshakes. You were within 6 feet of the infected individual for more than 15 minutes, had contact with infected individuals' respiratory secretions. An example of that would be someone maybe wasn't wearing a mask and coughed on you. You were sharing drinking glasses, food, towels or other personal items with an infected individual, or if you stayed overnight for at least one night in a household with an infected individual. If any of those things, you fall into any of those things, then you would be contacted by public health and notified that you were a close contact. They then maybe would ask you to quarantine. If you were considered a close contact, that means that you would stay home for 14 days from the initial contact with the infected individual. It can take anywhere from 2 to 14 days for symptoms to appear after you have been in contact with someone who is infected. We've also heard the term isolation. What does that mean? Isolation means that you are sick and showing symptoms or have tested positive for COVID-19 and that you should stay home. Public health will then direct you as to when you can come out of isolation or quarantine. Even if you don't have symptoms and you have been exposed or you are testing positive, you still need to stay home. If we have a student at school, I'll go back to the school exclusion criteria. If we have a student or staff member start showing symptoms while at school, we will ask them to immediately put on a mask if they're not wearing one already, which they should be now. Where we will remove that student from others or that staff member from others. They'll be removed from the classroom and they will be brought to our isolation room. Each building will have one space that will be big enough to have more than one student in there. They will be spaced 6 feet apart and have barriers in between to help protect each student. Parents will be notified that their child is showing symptoms and will need to pick that student up within 1 hour of being notified. Let's see what else. The isolation room, we're going to rename those so students aren't saying I'm going to the isolation room. We will have a name for that space. An adult staff member will be supervising students that are in those rooms waiting to be picked up. We will work closely with public health as needed to develop lists of students who are together that could be potential close contacts. And you would be notified then by public health if your student was in a room with an infected student and considered a close contact.
Denver, can you pause for a second?
Yep.
What'd you have?
We have a question that Denver, I think, is probably answered by you. Parent is asking, studies have shown that a classroom only clears approximately 10% of aerosols in a room over a period of an hour. Though our classes are around 40 to 45 minutes long, doesn't this constitute close contact even though a student may not be within 6 feet of an infected individual. Perhaps it's a green as well, I'm not sure, but wanted to ask the question.
I guess, yeah, I don't have that information. I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Thank you.
We will get to air exchange later at a later date or later time. Please continue, Denver.
Let's see. I think that's the majority of the information for the quarantine, isolation, close contact protocol, and exclusion from school criteria, and how we will handle students and staff members who become ill while at school.
And can you talk about the 72-hour, the
Symptom.
other close symptoms, other illnesses? If you
Well,
understand what I mean.
Yeah, if you go back to the exclusion criteria flow sheet, if a student comes in with those symptoms, we say yes, that they do have those symptoms. The student needs to be sent home and request that the parents have COVID testing done. If the testing is done and it comes back as positive, public health will follow up with that family. If the testing is done and it's negative, the student will need to be excluded until 24 hours symptom-free without the use of medication. If the student has the symptoms, but parents choose not to do testing, students need to be excluded for 72 hours after symptoms have resolved without the use of medication.
One of the questions, Denver, is what are we going to do when flu season comes when many people have symptoms similar to COVID?
Yep, that's a good question. I think we need to look at this as, any student, because the symptoms are so similar, that any student who comes in exhibiting those symptoms, we need to treat them as if they are potentially positive for COVID. We will continue to follow the flow sheet that you see on the screen. Parents will also be encouraged to contact their medical provider for testing. You can test for influenza to rule that out, and you can test for COVID to rule that out as well.
Denver, Jeff Redmond, would you speak to the asterisk about a kid that has allergies and things like that?
Yeah, so the symptoms that are outlined in that box at the beginning of the exclusion criteria flow sheet, these are symptoms that would be outside of the student's baseline. So if it's a child that we know has severe seasonal allergies and the symptoms that they're exhibiting are normal for their, the fall when they have trouble with their allergies, then we would look at that differently. This is going to be case by case, student by student.
And then Denver, one other thing for everyone's benefit, how can you tell us a little bit about the frequency of your contact with Synchronous Public Health and how many meetings, where we got to this point?
Sure. Yep. I meet with St. Croix County public health officials on a weekly basis. And I also meet with Wisconsin Department of Instruction's nurse consultant on a bi-weekly basis. And we've been doing that since the beginning of April.
Thank you.
So Denver, one of the questions, if a teacher teaches 6 classes per day with 20 students in each class and tests positive, do all 120 of those students need to stay home and quarantine?
This information we would consult with St. Croix County Public Health to determine who was in fact considered a close contact, and we would follow their instructions. So it'll be case by case.
If a student in my child's classroom tests positive for COVID-19, will I be alerted that a child in that classroom tested positive?
All right. So with that question, because of all the privacy laws that schools have to honor, we have to be really careful with the information that we're sharing. There will be notification made. It may not necessarily be that you know that there's a student in Mrs. Olson's class that tested positive. We may not even be able to say that what grade level it is in, but we can say what building that it is in. Also, if there is a positive case, we will be notified by the public health department, and they will be doing their interviewing for contact tracing, and will let you know if you or your child is in fact a close contact.
Thank you. Next question, well, I guess before we move on, any other clarification or questions regarding close contact and the quarantine protocol?
Yes, we have one.
And then maybe use the microphone.
Is Denver still on?
Denver's still on. She knows to stay on. All her questions are at the beginning.
So a question came, if a student is showing various symptoms over the course of several weeks, how often is testing required?
Oh, that's a good question. I think if they were tested and tested positive, really at that point, public health does take over and they give you instructions on when you can return to school. So I think that that would be a question that public health would be better to answer.
To my knowledge, they can't require testing, so the family could decide. They may recommend testing, but the family doesn't have to test. But then you'd follow the protocol of quarantining until the 72 hours or 14 days.
Correct.
Any other questions regarding close contact and quarantine at this point? Okay, thank you. So into daily operations now. Denver, why are temperature checks not being done at each school?
Well, at this point, the CDC does not currently recommend universal symptom screenings to be conducted by schools. Many children are asymptomatic or have very mild symptoms without fever. Infected individuals can spread illness up to 2 days prior to symptoms appearing, so we may not even catch a student. They may have already been in the building for a couple of days before their symptoms appear. Students may have been given fever-reducing medications prior to coming to school. Standing in line at the door every morning, waiting to have your temperature checked can take away from instruction time. With the amount of students that we have, it would take a long time each day to get all of them through the door. We're unable to really maintain students' privacy when conducting mass temperature screenings. If we had students lined up, how would we handle that? If we do have someone that has a high temperature, pulling them out of line, everyone gets to see who that student is. We're really encouraging parents and staff to monitor for signs of infectious illness daily and to keep their children home if they are ill.
I think you answered this mainly, but we'll ask it again just to make sure clarity on this. How many locations do you have at each building for symptomatic children to be isolated, and how will they be monitored there?
Yep, each building will have a room that will be dedicated just for students who are showing symptoms during the school day. That space will be monitored by an adult staff member.
Thank you. Next question I can answer. Is the school pushing to go back in person because of state and federal funding? And that's a no. We are funded for students that are enrolled in our district, whether they're in person or whether they're virtual or any combination thereof. So no, that is not, we're funded the same no matter where the students are being educated. What will drop off and pickup time look like at each school? And we'll pass the mic around to each building principal. Example, elementary parents are getting out of their car to help Johnny with his backpack, or at the high school, the pickup goes to the parking lot, etc. With more parents dropping off their kids, it could only get worse. So I would like to start with that question.
Kurt Soderberg from the high school. Our procedure for drop off in the morning will be much the same. We'll be outside helping to monitor and traffic. The times will essentially be the same, while we are encouraging students that can be dropped off between 7:35 and 10 to 8. Do that to help us keep social distancing. Students that are there for an event in the morning, or including working out in the weight room, are still allowed to do that, and they'll follow those procedures rather. Once inside the building, after 7:30, they go directly to their first hour classroom. In the meantime, they're allowed to have up to 4 students at a table, masked, waiting. So it'll be much the same as it has been. We'll be outside helping to move traffic.
Shelley Clay from the elementary school. As Kurt said, much of the same procedures will be the same. However, we will be having an additional drop-off area. The elementary gets very congested in the parent loop up top. So down on Division Street, where you'd be turning into the elementary school, we will have supervision down on Division, allowing our older students, the 3rd and 4th graders, to be dropped off by their parents, their folks at sidewalk. You know, we're not dropping and getting out at the street, but towards the sidewalk. That sidewalk runs all the way up to the building. So we will have increased supervision as we are hoping, and many are alluding to, they will be dropping their children off instead of riding the bus, which we do support if you're able. So we will make sure that we spread that out. We are asking no students to be dropped off at the elementary school, just like Kurt said, prior to 7:30. Students will be going directly to their classrooms instead of outside recess, where we would not be able to social distance as well, because we have 4K through 4th graders out there who would be able to cohort as easily. So staff will be in their classrooms starting at 7:30 and ready to go. So we're asking for that. So pretty much the same, but hopefully more supervision and a couple more access points of drop off.
So at the middle school, we're going to be basically matching the elementary. We won't be changing too much of our drop-off lane, as we have a very large drop-off area, and typically is not congested in the morning, but congested in the morning with too much traffic. We will have supervision in front and back of the building. But then as the elementary, instead of any type of recess in the morning or hanging out in the commons at 7:30, recommended drop-off time, we will be having students go directly to their homeroom in the morning. And if for breakfast, I know breakfast is a big deal for middle school students. They'll be asked to do a grab and go as they head to their classroom. So very similar to the other 2 buildings, and not a whole lot's going to change with the drop-off, because it's been pretty smooth in the mornings. But then we'll be staggering our release time at the end of the day, which will help with that also. So that's the middle school.
Ask that question, Nick or Lindsay, please. This came in regarding homeroom.
Will staff be in their homeroom classes for supervision, and if so, who will be supervising the hallways? I know at the elementary, I can speak to that. We have supervision scheduled for each hallway and then classrooms within those. And then each entry point, there's also added supervision at the elementary school.
Pretty much the same at the middle school. We'll have the classroom supervised and the hallways also. And it will be the same at the high school. We'll have teacher will be in the classroom, and we'll have adults in the hallways and the commons. Just as we typically would.
Okay, the next question is, do you have enough soap, hand sanitizer, and disinfectant products? Yes, we do. And Mr. Green, early on, there wasn't an overabundance of that, but manufacturers are catching up, and right now we're in a really good spot with that. Our students doing the cleaning in the classroom, that is a no. We have plenty of staff that does the cleaning. Teachers, adults might as well be doing some intermittent cleaning to help, but no, there's no plan for students to do any of the classroom or building cleaning. All right, we'll go next to what does lunch look like in each building?
This is Kurt Soderberg again at the high school. We'll have 4 lunches. That puts us at about 115 students per lunch. That will allow us to social distance at 4 per table. And we'll have students report to their table, and then we'll dismiss them from there so we're able to keep them distance in line. At this time, we're allowing students to, first day to pick who they sit with, and we'll sort through that and try to make that consistent. We also will open up the outside courtyard area, which is just outside the library towards the football field. We have 4 or 5 outdoor picnic tables, and we'll supervise that, allow students to be outside to increase safety as well.
Shelley Cobb Elementary. Lunch has been staggered for all of our grade levels. So we will be cohorting by grade level at the elementary school, which means we will have potentially around 120 or less students that would be cohorted every day. And again, that is for that contact tracing that Denver spoke of. So lunch we have spread out so that everyone is staggered and no grade levels will ever be overlapping. We also just got done today doing a lot of marking in the cafeteria with vinyl stickers, little dots on the floor that allow spacing for lines and where students know that they're going to need to stand on. That helps them just visualize what does social distancing actually look like. And then we also did vinyl stickering on all of the cafeteria tables. So each student, as always, children at the elementary eat by classroom. So they have 2 long cafeteria tables assigned to their classroom, which will be spread out throughout the whole cafeteria for 6 different sections of each grade level. And they will be cohorted that way, I guess, or assigned tables by classroom. They can still sit wherever they want within that classroom table. Also, there has been a lot of things done in each building in terms of delivery of food. So there's plexiglass that has been inserted into the cafeteria. Lunch ladies will be serving the food rather than any self-serve. There will not be any self-serve happening at any of the buildings. And trying to think if there was anything else. I think that's about it at the elementary.
Shelley, breakfast?
Thank you. Breakfast will be offered as usual for all 3 buildings. And so when they get to school, anytime between 7:30 and 8:05 when the first bell is, it is offered at all 3 buildings. So as normal.
At the middle school, we're going to be very similar to the high school. We're adding 5 tables. We have plenty of space to add tables, so we're going to be adding 5 tables, which will allow us to go 4 students per table. They will be on day 1 picking who their partners are going to be at their table, and then they will then transition to a recess, which we will be using 2 different outside areas to get them outside to take a mass break and social distance and get some fresh air. So That's the plan at the middle school.
What is the plan when a classroom has to be quarantined for 14 days without prior notice? So you maybe want to speak, one of you want to speak to our instructional plans and technology equipment, et cetera, and the planning and preparation. We are prepared for that.
I know conversations that have taken place with the administrative team and at the middle school. We've been fortunate enough, our tech has purchased some cameras that's gonna allow for our teachers not just to teach in person, but to be able to teach synchronously with any students at home. So we are preparing and we are giving our staff some time to prepare for such an incident, so we're not caught by surprise, and we are prepared to teach virtually within a day if necessary.
Good. Okay.
Can you clarify synchronous?
Yeah, so newer terms to us, at least in terms of instruction, are synchronous and asynchronous learning. So asynchronous is a lesson and work to be done at a person's convenience, where synchronous is live. So these cameras, which have great microphones on them as well, they'll be able to capture what's going on real time in the classroom. The instructor will be able to hit record and capture all that so they can watch it live synchronously or at a later time asynchronously. So now if entire class has to go out prepared to do much of the same like we did in the spring, only better, and maybe this would be a good time to talk about the improvements to what we learned from last spring and how we can make it better.
Yes, that's actually the next question, Tim. Before diving into that, I feel this is an important time to identify the difference between virtual school and at-home school. Our St. Croix Virtual Academy, directed by Mrs. Posta, our principal, virtual principal, is different than our at-home learning. So when the question says, what is the plan when the classroom has to be quarantined for 14 days prior to notice, means we will support at-home learning for the entire class by the classroom teacher, as long as the classroom teacher is well enough to do that from home. If not, we would have someone else support that. Substitute. So just wanted to clarify the difference between those. In terms of, the question is, if we have to go back to at-home learning, what changes will happen from last year's expectations and delivery? I think I could speak for everyone in this room that we learned a lot from last spring. We learned a lot of things that went well and a lot of things that didn't go so well. And I think we all did the best we could. Our staff was amazing. Our families were amazing to collaborate and to support everyone with. However, I know we've talked about it in depth a lot and with our staff about how we can do better. And so a few of those things that we've talked about, and I want to reiterate that the details of all of those things are still in progress. I don't want any to lead anyone to believe that we're not going to continue to do more. But a couple of the things that we feel very strongly about, we've had conversations about, is more of a schedule for all students and all staff on a daily basis, meaning more a daily interactive, whether it's live, like Tim said, or videos that are going out, or at least at the elementary level, all of our mini lessons, so that there is daily instruction provided to students. And then maybe they're doing some independent work from there. Don't want anyone to believe that at the elementary level that a child would be sitting online from 7:30 in the morning to 3:30. that is not how it will look. We do not think that's developmentally appropriate. So mini lessons and instruction will occur, but then some independent work would be happening as well. We also believe as a team that assessments, daily assessments, perhaps, and feedback are also very, very important, and know that we hope to go back to standards-based grading and regular grading perhaps rather than the pass-fail. That is something else we really talked about. And we also have learned that we need to provide one platform for families to be able, and students to be able to access. So instead of all of these links going out in all sorts of directions, we're looking at using Google Classroom for a 4K 12 platform where everything would be housed out of.
About student expectations and attendance.
Yes, the plan would be attendance is taken daily, and that the expectation of students, and I would speak from an elementary level, a lot of these guys, because I think that's a little bit different. We would take attendance in the morning, hopefully maybe, have everyone log on at a certain time, do morning meeting like we typically do in the classroom. We can do attendance, we can walk them through their day a little bit, things like that.
Yeah, and I would add that, at-home learning will take place, whether it's an individual that has, the symptoms and it's just at home for a while, or smaller groups, or entire classrooms, or perhaps even as large as the school. So, we are prepared. We know it is inevitable, so we are prepared, and again, providing extra time and training for our staff.
Add anything?
If it looks a little, your expectations maybe different, sure.
This is Kurt Solder again from high school. We know that we won't be pass fail. We need to honor the work of the kids and transcripts and so on. So we'll be regular grading. We are working out how to best do assessments if it's at home learning. We will figure that out. That is a work in progress. I wanted to touch base about what about students that they don't have that internet access and so on. I think we're far better prepared for that occurrence. And one of the tough things about this is there's so many different scenarios. Is there an opportunity, depending on the scenario, to have students who can't get internet access to be able to access a facility somewhere where it does have that internet access for them? So there's a lot of things there, but in terms of high school expectations, I agree fully with Shelley and Pete. We will take attendance. There will be a combination of asynchronous learning, synchronous learning. The expectation is that we will do standards-based grading, letter grades, the whole thing. So, and I feel fully confident in the technology that's been provided from our tech department and teachers' willingness to use that effectively, and just what we've learned in that first go around in the spring. I think we're going to be far better ready to serve the students.
I'd like just add anything if possible.
You spawned from the middle school, and very similar to the high school and elementary, but I think the one thing I truly want to communicate that I know I heard lots of feedback from is that the one thing I know all three buildings will be doing is providing more feedback on the learning. Absolutely. So we will be trying to provide that feedback daily, if not, every other day for sure. So students know if they're heading in the right path or not. I really want to add that feedback component because I know that's what I received a lot of questions and concerns about. So I wanted to get that added in.
Shelley, how will specials work at the elementary schools? Will kids stay mainly in the classroom and the specials teacher will come to them? And is going outside, if going outside isn't feasible?
Our plan to begin the school year is to have children go to the regular specialist classrooms, which many of them are planning to be held outside automatically. we have staggered the schedule again, changed the schedule just a bit. We have taken 60 minutes of specials daily down to 50 minutes, which allows for no interaction of any cohorts or any other classes as they transition, and also allows our specialists to sanitize in between every single classroom. We're gonna minimize probably as much over with tools, the use of tools and things like that as they go. Students will also be bringing their own supplies to, say, art or any of those classes that they might need supplies for.
Thank you. Maybe each school could talk about recess. I know maybe they may need lunch recess at high school, but let's start with recess at each building, what that looks like.
So recess at the elementary school will be held as normal. However, let me walk you through a few of our different recesses, because I think recess is probably the biggest at the elementary school. So the AM recess in the morning, as I spoke before, the students, instead of going outside for recess before school starts, they will go directly to their classrooms and will be supervised by their teachers and other supervisors. They then have a 15-minute morning or afternoon recess, depending on the grade level. All of those recesses, again, are cohorted by grade level. So none of those grade levels will ever overlap. And then at lunch, they also have a lunch recess, the same thing. We've staggered it. So again, we're keeping them in those cohorts. And after school recess, which we call is a second loading recess, is only for those students who are on those second loading buses. There will be children outside that will be from all different ages, but it usually is about 50 students or less. So we are going to take them outside for recess, but we have zones out on the playground. So each grade level will have their own zone per day for second loading. We encourage play equipment to come from home. If Johnny wants to bring a football and play, with it. So we're encouraging some of that if they want to bring home a little bit of that. We will be sanitizing daily after kids care would ever be outside as well. We'll do that in between, and then again after kids care. So it'll be completely sanitized daily.
At the high school, over the last 2 or maybe 3 years, we've had a 45-minute lunch. They've had 20 minutes or so to be in the gym or get outside. We will not be able to do that. We'll have 31-minute lunches. And they'll be able to get outside at the tables that are there, but there will be no, what we call lunch learning leisure. There'll be lunch, but no leisure, unfortunately. At the middle school, the students will still be provided anywhere from a 12 to 15-minute break with their lunch, which they will be with their grade level cohort. They will be asked to social distance. We are fortunate to have 2 areas that will be supervised for kids to go, be encouraged to social distance by the adults. But also my hope is give them a little mastery time and get some fresh air. Now, one of the things we have to work on, and I'm going to be honest with you, we have the 2 gyms, but how that looks in the winter for the entire building. We know that you still want to give them a little time to relax, but how we can get them to social distance in the 2 gyms yet, we have to hammer out. So I'm going to be honest, so we haven't worked that component out. 5th grade does have an extra recess in the afternoon, and even in the winter, they will be planning on going outside, social distancing, but getting the kids outside a second time. So
Next, will you please, we'll go back the other way, talk about physical education.
okay, well, At the middle school, I'm gonna talk about physical education and our music at the same time. So in our schedule in the past, our FIAD was always opposite of our choir, and our band was opposite of the study hall. Ben Helmrich has been gracious enough to do an amazing job. And because we wanted to limit the numbers, we want our kids to have music, we want our kids to have PE. But we know that our groups were in classes of 60, 70, sometimes 90. Ben Helmrich has worked out a 4-day schedule where we'll be able to keep the numbers low. For instance, I think each FIAD teacher will have students of 15 rather than 40. And they'll be able to get outside whenever possible. We also have 2 gyms. So each FIAD teacher will be able to have a gym with about 15, 16 kids. And then the music, will have very similar numbers, and they're gonna practice outside. For music, we're gonna be bringing older risers from the basement, put them outside on the guitar. So she will be getting them outside as much as possible, but they'll be in much smaller groups, and in band, we're gonna get outside as much as possible, much smaller groups, and we feel it's important that they still have access to that, but it's the only way we can limit the number of kids. So that's how we're gonna run FIAD in our music this year at middle school.
Yes, elementary school, FIAD will be held outside for, well, as long as possible. That's the plan for right now. We, of course, and I should have said more about this with recess, with social distancing and being outside and it being a time for a mask-free time. We also know and have been given a lot of guidance about the importance of being mask-free when you are able to be. So we will try to do that when we're outside for a little bit and know that we can be social distanced and have that opportunity. So FIAD will be outside until further notice. I guess if it's raining, and we're inside, our gyms are large enough that we can all social distance for one of our classrooms.
At the high school, physical education will take place outside as much as possible. We will likely change the structure of some of the classes to be more of a personal fitness rather than sharing equipment and so on. So that's a little bit different philosophy that we're going to use. And we'll try to be outside as much as we can. We do have plans. Many of the students that have been involved in the preseason athletics and activity stuff have noticed the cleaning of equipment between uses and so on. And so we feel pretty comfortable about that. We do need to tighten up our plan for locker room use because high school students will get sweaty during physical education. They're gonna, personal hygiene is going to be important as well. So we have to work that out. But I know our physical education teachers are working hard to make meaningful activities and probably more on an individual, personalized basis for much of it. Our outdoor education class will obviously be outdoors as much as possible, and that lends itself very easily to social distancing and cross-country trail and so on. In terms of band and choir, Mr. Conway has gone in and measured the band room and the auxiliary gym, and we can get our entire band in the aux gym spaced properly. So that's the plan. We'll be using that for the full band if they're not outside. The first priority is to be outside, likely in the stadium bleachers, or if they're working, or they could be working on the field as well. The choir has the opportunity to go outside as well. However, we have space in the auditorium, likely with the students in the seats, distance, and the teacher up on the stage. We need to finalize that in terms of which location they'll be on the stage or in the chairs. We will have those things going on. There will also still be individual lessons and choir throughout the day, and small group, 3 or 4 spaced in the band room. Perhaps, for example, maybe it's the trombones are going to be in there together. So Sean Conway and Amanda Arnold are working very hard to make those plans. We're excited to be able to still offer them. Lockers for Fayette, I think I spoke to, but I'll make sure I'm clear. Yeah, so we're still working on a plan for how that's gonna work. We know that high school kids are gonna sweat during physical education. We want them to be, obviously, personal hygiene is important. We do need to work out what that looks like in terms of what spaces we're gonna use. We may have to split kids up depending what the need is. If you have 10 kids and 5 go to one locker room, 5 to another. We're fortunate at SEC to have 2 male locker rooms, 2 female locker rooms. So there should be enough space for most of the time. So again, not to be indecisive, but that's still something we're working with, keeping an eye on what the Physical Education Association recommending, and so on and so forth. Very similar to what we look at with band and choir, what other professional organizations recommend. So we do have some work to do on our protocol for the FIA locker.
Athletics?
Yes, please. So next, Mr. Johnson will talk about athletics.
The $1 million topic. We are hoping and planning for our fall seasons to take place. We're closely following the local and state health guidelines as well as guidance from the WIAA. Recently, the WIAA had a board of control meeting where they pushed back the seasons for fall sports. That was to get us some more time to prepare and take a look and see what was happening around the state. We have been in the weight room since July. We've been running some open gyms for basketball and volleyball. We've had contact days for football, and in all of those activities, and we followed the protocols and the guidance, including the latest mask orders. We've been able to implement wearing the mask in the weight room. And the Middle Order Conference ADs meet weekly to revamp schedules, minimize travel, and get as much social distancing as possible.
Well, more specifics, Tim, or is that good enough?
I think that's good. We'll keep it high level. If people have specific questions, you're welcome to submit them. So since strength and conditioning program, open gyms, contact days have started, that started back July 1. How many positive cases have we had of our students from those activities? Zero. Okay. I think that's important to note. Thank you. That's kudos to everyone and their efforts for the mitigation practices. Will before and after school care, kids care, be offered?
Yes, it will be offered. Registration for fall open today. So in my newsletter from the elementary school that came out on Monday, had all of that information in there. So if you need more information, please feel free to call the Kids Care line or the elementary school.
What's the average class size at the elementary school, and would one class be a cohort?
So to identify a cohort again, it is the grade level. When we get down to having a cohort of an individual classroom, it becomes extremely difficult because we would never have, for lunch or recess, we would never be allowed to be in there at the same time, where increased supervision would be a very complex issue. In terms of average class sizes, we're running around 18, 19 in our lower K2 classrooms, around 20 to 22 in our 3 and 4.
Greg Green, this question is for you. Can you more clearly explain the air changes per hour and filtration system upgrades or lack thereof, and why you feel it is sufficient?
Well, I did some digging on this. We did some recommissioning in 2015 while we were under construction on all of our units. and found that the typical design for classrooms and schools is 6 to 20 air changes per hour. And with the upgrades that we made, we are getting about 10 to 12 air changes per hour. So we are within the ASHRAE limits that we have. And again, we want to do building air flushes before the students arrive. And then during the day also, at some point it'll be on a schedule, and then after school also, which the dampers will open, and we'll have a scheduled amount of time that they're open. Winter time is going to be a little bit tougher because of the cold weather. It'll take the temperature down in the building quite a bit, so we got to watch that, but still do the dampers, get the dampers open, get all of the fresh air we can in the buildings before and after school. That's what we're going to go with.
Thank you. Question? Yes. You have a microphone? Lindsay or Nick, or one of you can ask it? Okay.
These questions just go off of what Greg was speaking to. Is the testing done on the air exchange per classroom, or is it building average? And then also, are the filters being used, are the HEPA filters being used for HVAC system?
The air exchanges is per classroom. And we average that on a classroom as a 30 by 30 classroom. That's about the average size of a classroom. The HEPA filters will restrict the air too much, that we cannot get that airflow to flush the building the way it should be. So we're going with the filters that we have. We do have our filters changed 3 times a year on a rigorous schedule, and that's been working well for us at this time.
All right, thank you. Will children switch rooms? If so, will desks be disinfected each time students switch rooms? So principals, I don't know if it's different per building, or I don't think it is.
We, at the middle school, in our weekly meetings in regards to preparing for start of the year, we had a conversation on Monday, and then our custodian was a big part. Gary talked about we have to look specifically for the right type of cleaner, because if you've looked at a lot of the cleaners, the wait time should be about 10 minutes to accurately remove any of the germs and so forth that you're trying to remove. So our hope is to wipe tables down and disinfect, but our goal is to try to find, because if anybody really looked in the Clorox wipes, technically, it should be dried for 10 minutes before any type of contact. So a 10-minute wait time is a concern for us. So we're researching that, and it's a big part of our conversation. And our hope will be to, for sure, regardless if we have a 10-minute wait time, to be wiping things out.
So that is for the middle school and the high school. At the elementary school, we do no switching of classrooms, other than the specials that I spoke of earlier.
Thank you. If a student is sick or being cautious, which I want to note, definitely encourage, about a runny nose, etc., will virtual learning be available for the students to continue learning from home? I think we answered that already very clearly. What will be done for the students to get the education they missed out last year and get caught up?
So I can start from a district standpoint. We have taken an opportunity to really do a lot of PD this summer in a various of ways, adding another additional PD day here at the end of August so that we can get all of our teachers together for K-12 to be able to really take a deeper look at where students left off in the spring. And although we have to remember that they were at home, there was still a lot of learning happening. So we have to really assess where the kids are at. So as they come in, we will obviously be doing a lot of assessing to see where they left off. But in terms of essential standards, we're going to be meeting with the previous grade levels and the ones after us to really talk through those essential standards of, okay, where do we need to put in some review? What essential standards maybe we're not taught at all? And we have to try to look at our scope and sequence to determine where can we fit those essential standards in to our current year to catch all of those learning gaps, perhaps, that are there. We have to do that.
At the high school, before we broke for summer, we had an audit basically of individual students and what their needs were. So we have that information. We've been working on that. So we'll be ready when they come here. But also at the department and subject level, they will be talking about basically what Shelley said, what wasn't covered, what was covered. And then it's a matter of digging into the kids and seeing where they're at. So we're gonna have to be flexible and agile, but we're keenly aware of the academic and the social needs that we'll be facing when we come back. So we can give some general statements to that, but until we get in front of the kids, we can't know for sure the impact. So we'll be ready, adding on all three buildings.
Can go back to the previous question for a minute.
Yes.
So push it up on the screen. I appreciate that these came in before tonight, but I just want to make sure that will virtual learning be available for students to continue to learn from home? That when they're sick and stay home, that's not, they aren't going to switch to virtual ed. They will have in-home learning, which will be synchronous, asynchronous with their class, and it's not virtual ed.
Right. Yeah, and this verbiage is right from the parent.
No, I
questions, not
understand, and this
ours.
came in before tonight's explanation, but they aren't going to switch to the virtual ed thing.
Right. Distinction.
Right, to look at it, we have a virtual school, and that's a separate entity, just for definition. See.
I just thought it was helpful to clarify that.
Good with that?
Yep.
Good, okay. Please explain what you mean by kids being in cohorts. Do they have to stay in the same room with the same group of kids all day? So I think we've answered that. Cohort is a group, and no, they do not have to stay in the same room with the same group of kids all day.
If I may speak to the high school, so I saw a question come up and it kind of deals with this. So the high school, we're not going to cohort them in terms of keeping them with the same group. They will run their normal schedule. So there will be assigned seats, and we'll talk about masks later. We'll do everything we can to social distance and those protocols as well. But they will go through their normal day, and they will have assigned seats in their classrooms, which is unique in a lot of high school classrooms. And that is really so that we can better identify contact tracing if we need be. Same thing with lab partners. When we're talking about equipment use, like you mentioned Ed, but there's also tech ed and so on. Those will be cleaned regularly between classes, and that's important to know. I know that we are looking at, for example, in art class, having kits. So a student will be assigned a kit where they have their own brushes. They never have to use somebody else's. And so while we can't cohort, we are taking those practices very seriously, and we want to be practical, but at the same time, make sure that the kids are getting the full high school experience with the classes that they've chosen to take.
Who will be teaching my child in person if their teacher is affected by COVID? So that'll be substitute teacher and or a staff member if, you know, in the past we've had to maybe reassign or shuffle a few people or whatever. So we have that flexibility, which leads to the next question. How is the school preparing for the substitute teacher shortage? I want to acknowledge this is a concern. And we've been, you know, short on subs many days in the past, and we have done a substitute teacher and paraprofessional all staff survey, and we know there will not be some folks that have subbed for us in the past returning, and of those returning, some have chosen, understandably, to just substitute teach or substitute in one building. So we've started some, you know, planning and brainstorming, and again, we'll have some flexibility within our own staff that we'll have to exercise perhaps short term or on a daily basis using our spaces that may be available and our staff that is available. Secondly, we're exploring full-time substitute positions as well to try and combat that. So those are just some of the conversations we're having. But again, admittedly, this is one of our areas of concern that we'll keep brainstorming on.
Can you speak to a healthy quarantined teacher?
Yeah. So if there's a healthy quarantine teacher, we'd like the continuity of teaching and learning to continue where they can do that from home and still teaching students in their classrooms in school, again, with another staff member, perhaps a paraeducator, you know, supervising them in person, yet getting the same regular instruction that they normally would get face-to-face through our technology. Will kids be able to use their lockers this year? I want to speak to that at each school, please.
Sure, at the high school, we will not be using lockers this year. We'll be using Phi-Ed lockers, but not the regular lockers, partly because of the uniqueness of our lockers are all in one bank. So kids are going to gather there, as any of us would. So to eliminate that, we will not be using lockers for the foreseeable future. We are working on putting up hooks in the hallways, outside classrooms for coats and stuff to hang up. We would ask students to take their backpacks into the classroom. And some teachers have talked about having them all put them in front of the classroom so there's not a distraction. And so that's where we're at for the foreseeable future.
At the elementary, we do not have lockers, but we do have backpack and coat hooks outside of the classrooms. We will continue to utilize those, but we'll be planning to be splitting classes in half as they come and go from those hooks in and out of the classroom, just to help with some social distancing in that arena.
At the middle school, they will be allowed to go to the lockers to start the day and to end the day. And we will be, with supervision, allowing any student that has a lunch, be able to scurry to their locker to get their lunch prior to that, but that's going to be the only time. And we do have the uniqueness of the 5th grade in our building. They have cubbies and hooks very similar to the elementary. And they will be utilizing those, and very similar to the elementary. At the middle school, the 5th grade teachers will be staggering their dismissal so the kids aren't crossing over and bumping each other all the time in between. So at middle school, at the beginning and at the end.
All right. Is there anything we can do as parent?
You want to wrap up, see if there's any
Oh,
other
yeah.
questions on the operations?
There's a question about middle school when. Will there be middle
Oh yeah,
school
high school and middle school when maybe I saw in there. Study hall.
and middle school for when?
So maybe repeat the question.
Will there be when at the middle school?
So what I need at the middle school typically is at the end of the day. And we will be making a decision on Monday on whether or not, due to the restructuring of our schedule, each because band now is being moved in with choir, we're looking at adding or moving our WIN to specifically within their study hall time and transitioning that WIN time then at the end of the day to more social emotional work and to allow us to stagger our release time. So we will be making a final decision on Monday, but we will be providing WIN. We're just not sure what time of the day if that will be. Sorry. So just to clarify, at the high school, we will not have WIN at the end of the day. We will have, we've added 5 minutes each class period, so we'll have 50-minute periods. That was a suggestion from the teachers too, so that they could get extra time with their kids in class right there at that moment. We also have gone to a model of lunch, and then that lunch is attached to a study hall. So they'll have study hall and then there's additional 5 minutes per classroom period. So we did not want to do WIN because that would mix the kids up even more. And so to try to honor social distancing and be as safe as we can, we decided to not do WIN and try to fold that in throughout the day. So hopefully that will work well. I know our teachers are prepared for it.
Any other questions before we move on? All right, planning. Is there anything we can do as parents to prepare our children for the new protocols?
I could speak to the high school. There'll be information coming out. Probably it will be a video and a slide deck, just kind of going through some of the key points. And I think that'll be the easiest thing. It's going to be different, so that first day with students will be important to go through those procedures and protocols. But we will, I'll speak to the high school. We will be sending out a video that explains what it looks like and just basically walk you through the day and go from there.
At the elementary school, very similar. Today we had a group of us working at the elementary school creating various videos for young children, several staff members reading different social stories that kind of walk them through what is it going to look like on the bus? What is it going to look like and how am I going to have to wear a mask? What does it mean? Can I still talk to my friends? And, you know, all of those little things that are going through their heads. So one of the things I think, I appreciate this question, by the way. We feel to have your support and that collaboration partnership at home is enormously important. So I think we have to always remember, right? We aren't going to agree with everything that happens, but I think it's very important that we tailor it to our children and remember that they're hearing the positives and the negatives that we are creating for our children. I know myself as a parent as well. So I would ask to help to prepare them, to walk them through the things that we are asking that have to happen at school, like a mask. Prep them on how to wear a mask, and we at the elementary school are going to be helping our younger students manage those masks by, we have ordered lanyards for all of our 700 students nearly that will hook to their mask that will allow them, when they have the opportunity to take it off, it will just hang from them right down in front of them. So we're not losing them, they're not on the floor, they're not in the lunch trays, things like that. So I guess we just ask you to please help watch those videos, share with your children about that, but I think most importantly about the masks.
Newsbound Middle School, and very similar to Shelley and Kurt, we had a teacher that has already talked about and volunteered to spearhead the making of the videos we're going to be developing. Teach tools very similar to what the elementary utilizes and we do at the middle school. But I think my biggest concern is the mask. I see a lot of students wear masks, but we just facilitated our open house for 5th grade. And, you know, we had some students that were sitting in the bleachers and, you know, after about 15, 20 minutes, it was enough for them. And I saw a couple kind of just turned off to the side a little bit. So if any type of preparation of asking them to wear a mask, maybe for longer periods of time prior to getting to school, will be beneficial. But I think most importantly, my biggest concern is we all know that social interaction is really important. And having conversations with your children about the fact that, especially at the middle school level, is that you're not gonna have that 15 minutes hanging out your locker with your friends now. And preparing them for that and letting them know it's okay, and then finding ways maybe outside of that school time where we can get a little bit more of that social interaction. That's a big concern, I know, for me at middle school.
And I would just echo the, being intentional, again, very much appreciate that question and helping prepare your children for school. Being intentional with wearing masks, make sure they fit well. You know, there's many different masks out there, and mask stamina, right? When we first started wearing masks, it was unusual, and maybe, just we weren't used to it. So after a while, it, becomes more comfortable. But again, practice stamina, wearing a mask for 15 minutes, and then half an hour or then 2 hours or whatever to simulate, their experience at school would be really helpful. And then again, just try out different masks so that find one that is comfortable for your child.
Can I add to that too? One thing I'd like to say is to parents more, and children too, but mostly to the parents, ask questions of the principals and of the teachers rather than going to a social media and start. The story changes and the story changes and the story changes on social media. So come to the sources as often as possible if you have questions, please.
Did the school seek outside assistance when making recommendations? Yes, many different entities collaborated with, the obvious, the CDC guidelines, the health experts, especially the CDC, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, St. Croix County Public Health, DPI, OSSA, WASDA, all the superintendent and administrator organizations, and then of course, right down to the curricular areas from, band and choir and physical education and art and all those state organizations, much collaboration. In addition, local CISAs, statewide superintendent meetings. We have one every 2 weeks. We have our CISA superintendent meeting every 2 weeks. We have a local superintendent meeting with St. Croix County Public Health weekly, as well as the nurses have that weekly. So yes, many entities, much collaboration and shared planning for that. Next question is, at what point would we have to go back to distance learning or at-home learning? Is there a set number of positive cases or percentage that the county would mandate this? And the answer to that is no. I know Minnesota has a formula, et cetera. Wisconsin, our county does not. It's going to be like any other communicable disease or pandemic guidelines. It's just going to be made in collaboration. It is a very common question. There is no set number, but again, it's going to be every positive case, collaboration with the county, and that threshold is to be determined.
And we also know that there's currently no number, but things change on a daily basis.
How much additional money has SEC received from the CARES Act or other resources for COVID relief? So the schools in the state of Wisconsin were funded through what the normal Title I allocation is. That's what they determined each school would get, which varies depending on poverty levels in the county and enrollment, et cetera. For us, that is exactly $40,000. So $40,000 we received from CARES Act, of which the majority is already spent for personal protective equipment and disinfectant, other cleaning supplies, plexiglass, barriers, etc. Our staff planning for future online instruction in case COVID worsens in October. Yes, we already covered that, most definitely. Will there be an opportunity for students to shift from virtual back to in-person if virus conditions change? So maybe Steph, you want to take that one?
So we've asked everyone that is signing up for the virtual charter school to make a 1 semester commitment. After that 1 semester, they are more than welcome to switch back to brick and mortar buildings if they see fit.
How late can you still sign up for 100% virtual school if things change between now and the beginning of the school year?
There is not a set deadline, but what I will tell you is with a large influx of applications coming in, it looks as though you would need to let us know by next week in order to have your materials on time for the start of the school year, due to the fact that some of those materials are coming from outside vendors and some of those vendors are backed up in their shipping times. So in order to guarantee you a 9/1 start date, we would like to know by next week if possible. You still have time afterwards, but we just can't guarantee that start date at that point.
Steph, there's probably a lot of people on right now that aren't fully aware of what the virtual school is compared to what our regular school is. Can you give the little overview of it?
Sure. So the basic program, just in a nutshell, for the elementary is a blended model of some online learning and some paper pencil textbook type work. The percentage of online work increases the older that you get. So a kindergartner would not spend much time online each day in comparison to a 5th grader, 6th grader, 7th grader, and so on. Teachers will be checking in with those students regularly. Parents are provided all of the materials and have a very good idea of what is to be worked on each day and each week. Any questions can be directed towards the teacher. They're always available to help with any of those questions. Once you hit middle school and high school, that work is all online and it is asynchronous. So they are not online with the teachers at the same time. It is at their own pace and on their own schedule, providing them some flexibility in those courses. Again, teachers are always available to help with any questions that they have.
But to be clear, the elementary model you said is, it's not the same blended as what we've been talking about in terms of COVID. It's all away from school.
It is all away from school, all done at home. Yes.
And to be maybe further clarify, the virtual school provides a computer and curriculum, grade level specific curriculum for that student.
Correct.
Questions that are coming in the chat?
The question says, will the virtual charter school student be eligible for school, lunch, breakfast, and the backpack program, similar to how it was at the end of last year? So the answer to that is, if you're enrolled in our district, you are eligible for lunches, backpack program, all of those things, but there is no delivery of that food. So if you're choosing to have your child partake in those meals, you would need to pick that up at school for them.
Before moving on to transportation, any other questions need to be addressed with daily operation?
What will be the protocol for quarantine with siblings in the same building and also across other buildings within the district?
Denver, would you like to take that?
Sure, I can answer that. And then I see there's a couple other questions here about nurses in the buildings that I can answer too. The first question about the quarantine with siblings. If you have one child who is considered a close contact, it doesn't necessarily mean that your other children would need to quarantine as long as that child that's a close contact does not have symptoms or develop symptoms. If they were to develop symptoms, then the other people in your household would definitely be considered close contacts and would need to quarantine. But again, you will be directed by public health officials on how to move forward if you do have someone in your household who is considered a close contact. There was a question about the 4-case site, if there would be a nurse at Trinity, I believe. No, there will not be a nurse in that building. We will have to do training with the teachers to figure out how, to teach them what they need to know about exclusion criteria and when students would need to be sent home. There was another question, will there be a registered nurse at every building every day? We have a registered nurse at the middle school, a registered nurse at the elementary, and the high school has a health assistant who is trained by the nurses.
Thank you. Lindsay or Nick, any other questions before moving on?
Yeah, there was a question about the legality of live streaming from a classroom and other students being in a video.
Yes, so that certainly is something we've been in contact with regarding legal and obviously technology experts, and we feel comfortable with their plan. I don't know if we want to, get into specifics, but what's happening in the classroom daily, it would be emulated. Maybe somebody could be watching that from home. It is there are concerns and risks when there are cameras in people's homes, right? If the student's using that and what could be happening there. But I don't know if you want to talk to that at all, Chad, if there's anything worth mentioning regarding that piece.
The interactive part in the classrooms would be done with Google Meet. And the links for those are only shared out with the students. So the student device that they're given, those devices can only be logged into with our school accounts. So those links will be sent out through Classroom, which are sent to only students. We also have our Google Classrooms are set up so that only SCC accounts can be added to those Google Classrooms. So those links for the meetings won't be shared outside our district.
And to be clear, each of the students and the staff have their own SCC account, and they're the only ones that would be authorized to get into those.
That's correct.
Okay.
And if there's a camera in a classroom broadcasting the instruction, is it specifically positioned for a specific section of the classroom to be shown in the video, or?
Yeah, the classrooms are set up very differently from, grade, even grade between grades. But yeah, for the most part, what we've gone through and what we've tested is that those cameras will be able to be placed so that they're facing the front of the room where the teacher will be doing the instruction, and the students would be behind those cameras. In the scenario where maybe the staff member would have to be at home and the students would be there with a paraprofessional, then we may have to turn that camera around so that the staff member would be able to see the students and work that way. But we have a lot of flexibility with how we can set that up.
Any other questions?
Do we have another question? Several questions have come up regarding masks and Governor Eber's order regarding social distancing within the school district, or within the school building. And our communication last week being that when they are outside 6 feet, they will not have to wear masks. Does that now change?
Let me take that one. Yes, Governor Evers, that order requires that whenever indoors, masks are to be worn. So that simplifies and clarifies that expectation.
When outside, so, they want to share about that?
Yes, so yes, when outside, social distancing, they are not required outside when they're able to social distance. So that's important to have, like I mentioned previously, mask breaks.
And can you talk at all about the hope or plan or outside classrooms? What are we hoping to do, able to do, teacher by teacher, weather related, but what's the current thought?
Yeah, so using outdoor spaces as much as possible. Obviously, weather doesn't always cooperate with that. So Mr. Green is looking into renting those big festival tents to provide shade when it's hot in August and provide dry area out of the weather. And even if they have the flaps, could be used, well into some colder weather and perhaps all year. So that's a little outside the box thinking that we're looking into. We're getting to behaviors.
And one more quick, before we get to the busing and behaviors, can you speak to non-school use of school facilities?
Yeah, so currently, and we anticipate doing this for as long as we need to, but we're not allowing, outside groups to come into our buildings, such as community ed, et cetera. So we're trying to limit that again as a mitigation strategy. In terms of busing, one of the questions was, why are you loading buses from front to back and not separating by age? Having younger kids next to older high school students is not appropriate. We recognize that, like many of the issues regarding this whole COVID thing, there's a crux in safety, versus practicality and functionality and developmentally appropriate strategies. And that's, we feel because buses are such a confined space that we are leaning on the side of safety and mitigation practices over being developmentally appropriate. And with high school students next to younger kids, we recognize that as a general statement. But as always, we're enforcing character and appropriate behavior and monitoring that. So in this case, safety and mitigation practices take a priority. And loading from back to front, separating by age, again, minimizing the close contact and using the cohorting strategy is why we do that. Any questions regarding transportation or busing? We appreciate parents are willing to drive their kids if possible to reduce the number of riders on our buses. That certainly is much appreciated and very helpful. In terms of behaviors, I think all behaviors, this specific question talks about how will the school handle situations where students may intentionally cough or spit on other students, or another question is, what are we going to do if students refuse to wear the mask? Or we treat, it's no different. It's a behavior correction opportunity, behavior infraction, and will be addressed on a case-by-case basis, just like we always do. Mask wearing is an expectation. We will work with the students and the families to work through that. It's a behavior. In terms of students not wearing masks, and there will be students that will be unable to or not required because of underlying health conditions, sensory issues, et cetera. And again, that will be worked, work cooperatively with the student and their family on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, are there any other questions with regards to behaviors? Are there any other questions that we didn't address?
At this time, we've addressed all the ones that have come through the chat. All this one.
Yeah, sounds good.
I was just gonna say, give it a couple of minutes
Yeah.
to accept new questions.
There was one that I had seen that I think bears at least entertaining. They had asked if hat wearing was gonna be relaxed in the buildings, so students could actually put buttons or something on a hat to give their ears a rest, put their elastic straps on a hat. I don't know that you have an answer for that right now, but it was just something that I had seen online.
Will you address staff apparel?
Staff attire, yep.
Yes, thank you.
So, yeah, staff, our dress expectations are being relaxed to just, again, for practicality and laundering and sterilizing clothes regularly. You know, it's more difficult with clothing items that have to be dry cleaned, and so we're relaxing that a little bit. So if you see staff dressed a little more casually, it's because of, you know, health practices.
Has that been determined?
It hasn't been yet.
Okay.
And one of the things that had also come up was the masks possibly through the school store. And I believe a question was the cost. And I think that we had discussed it briefly before. The masks were costing the district somewhere around $3.95. We bumped it to exactly $4 for easy change for everybody. So the district is not making massive profit off of these masks. It's more of a convenience thing for the kids, the families that can buy it straight through the store. We simply bumped it by approximately a nickel to make it easy change in the store to go to even $4.
Are there any other questions or comments?
There's a question about us using baby wipes to sanitize. Why are we using baby wipes to sanitize?
Craig, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not using baby wipes to my knowledge. They're the Clorox wipes.
Yeah, we're not using baby wipes in any form at all for any sanitization. It'll be alcohol-based wipes that kills the coronavirus and everything else. So no baby wipes.
Appears maybe it's on the 4K supplies list. That's where that came from. 4K supplies list has baby wipes, but that's not used for sanitation, just for.
Correct. It is not used for sanitation. Oftentimes, baby wipes are used if they are using a whiteboard where they're, you know, drawing with a dry erase marker, and then you erase it from that.
One question was about CARES, you know, and you maybe want to address that.
Yeah, the question is, at the elementary school, CARES used to stand for something other than Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. How will we be teaching these traits, especially empathy, with a mask and social distancing? So quite honestly, I hope that our younger children have no idea what that means for the alternative of CARES. So we will continue to teach CARES at the elementary school as we always have, with a huge emphasis on empathy this year in regards to mask and social distancing. So again, today, a group of teachers, we all met, we broke down all of the different teach twos that we're going to be needing to do day one with all students on expectations of masks and social distancing and how we behave and act in those situations.
A la carte will not be offered for lunch. That was one of the questions. It's all going to be served by our food service staff and any packet or any a lot of more packaged foods.
Do you want to, maybe a clarification that would help is, do we want to send information out on appropriate masks or what do meet the criteria or don't meet the criteria, or potentially address that?
Yeah, that
before
definition.
people spend money or time or anything searching for it and get things that maybe might not meet the criteria.
Right, the definition of a face covering, so you, or Denver, you may be able to answer, it's right in the CDC and DHS, and there's lots of definitions, but we could be intentional with sending that out in our information between now and school, certainly.
Yeah, Tim, this is Denver. I think that's something we need to really look into and clarify.
Okay.
You want to mention the kids that kids are going to get?
The kids.
The welcome.
Yes, Denver, would you like to maybe explain the welcome back cinch sacks and what's in them for each student that they'll be receiving?
Yep, we decided to put together a welcome back bag cinch sack for each student. And in the cinch sack will be 2 of the cloth face coverings that were donated to the school, as well as a water bottle. So every student has their own water bottle to bring, and a small spray hand sanitizer. There will also be information included in there on how to safely wear your cloth face covering, and also hand washing and just everyday precautions and things you can talk to your children about before they come back or when they get back to school.
And why are the water bottles important?
The water bottles are important because the drinking fountains will not be used. Only the bottle filling stations will be available. So we want to make sure every student has their own water bottle.
And we recommend that they personalize them right away and make them easily identifiable.
Water bottles and masks.
Another question, Kurt?
Sure. The question is, what are the class sizes at the middle school and high school? What kind of social distancing can occur in their classrooms with an estimated class size? So at the high school, the class size will range from 8 to 30. And so one of the things that we've identified is we'll have our class sections very soon, probably by the end of the week. And we will look at, let's say it's a class of 30 freshman English students. We'll be looking at trying to find a separate space and team with another ELA teacher, for example, and have that lead teacher teach from their room live and stream it into another room. That's one option. We know that social distancing can be a challenge at times, but we feel like we have enough flexible space to be able to do that. And as long as we have the adults to help manage that, that's one of the, I think, really kind of neat ideas that we came up with for trying to maximize space. We also have a lecture room, which is an option, and we have, because I mentioned earlier, band and choir will be at different locations. Those are 2 additional large classrooms that we can use. So we have the space to do it, and right now that's the plan. So we will know our specific section size numbers here late this week or early next week, and we'll go to work on those plans. At the middle school, generally the average is anywhere from 20 to 23, 24. Saying we have a lot of staff members that are moving furniture out, and they're going to be making clusters of desks and getting 6 feet in between them and so forth. So we're looking and already working with Gary and where we can find some storage for the furniture we're going to be moving out. In all honesty, we are going to struggle a little bit with the 8th grade group. It is the bubble class with almost 150 kids. So we are going to be looking at very similar to what Mr. Soderberg talked about. Either possibly moving some of those classes to auxiliary gym when they are up in the 30s, but also possibly finding a different classroom and streaming. That's one thing we have to figure out, with a couple of the 8th grade sections. Otherwise, we average about 20, 22, and we're moving furniture out for more working classrooms.
Okay, are there other questions?
Again, other questions may come in. I encourage you to, reach out to the appropriate person and start with the building principals. But if it's, health related, Denver Garfield, food service related, Tammy Simonson, buildings and grounds, Greg Green, virtual school, Stephanie Posta, transportation, Pete Nussbaum, obviously myself. There will be more questions. There will be much more information coming out. But, it's 3.5 weeks away. So just thank you for participating in this. Appreciate the questions, most certainly. Sharing of information. This video will be posted and shared so that hopefully our wish would be every parent can get this information. Very helpful. Any last questions?
I do have one question. I know you addressed this, Tim, but want to respect Andrew's question. If subs are not available, how will classes be handled? Will they be split between other classrooms? The question you'd like principals to answer?
At the high school, we have, if there's a sub shortage, which we will likely have, we have kind of a tradition there of teachers stepping up that have their prep and taking over for other teachers. I just mentioned to our team today that means that Mr. Johnson and Mr. Sotovich in the classroom for a day. And that's where we're going to be. It's all hands on deck. We'll figure it out. But that's one of the advantages we have at the high school is that we have our critters don't need the direct attention all the time. So we can move people around. Teachers have been very willing to take their prep time and help. And so that's what we would continue to expect to happen. So great question. And that's how we'll try to handle it in high school.
Yeah, this is Shelley from the elementary. As Tim indicated earlier, this is a cause of concern for us. And that is why we have opted to look for long-term subs for the buildings that can help in any given situation if that were to occur. As Kurt said, that doesn't mean Mrs. Jacobs or myself might not be in a classroom, or we would have, it's just an all hands on deck approach is what we talked about a lot in our elementary committee building meetings. And we have a lot of people that are para. We have a few paras who are also licensed teachers as well. Doesn't mean we, need to move things around just a bit. And sure, we do it every day. So we will do the best that we possibly can for all children.
At middle school, I cannot beat that answer right there. So I'm just going to say what Shelley said at the elementary. We don't know, but we're going to do our best to make sure kids have coverage. I can be honest with you though, I can't ever see us taking kids and splitting them and adding numbers to other classes. So I can't see that happening in direct response to the question. As I know at the middle school, we would not be splitting classes and adding numbers to any other classroom. We'd be finding other ways to cover it.
Any other additional questions? Well, thank you all that were able to participate in the meeting tonight. If you do have additional questions, please submit those through the district office or place them on the website. We will monitor that and hopefully get the questions answered in a timely fashion. So, do we have anybody else with any comments? Well, I want to thank the community members for participating in the meeting tonight, and hopefully we got the information to help you make the decisions that will be coming up over the next month. So thank you very much.
Also, thanks to the staff for all the work that you guys put into this.
Okay. Is there any other business we have to cover at this time? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay. Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jim.